sort of start to pose a few more kind of broad questions, but I'd like to start with Team Adaptive. You know, one of the things about having many different versions of a book condensed into one is that we kind of dive deeper into this sort of postmodern state of like the death of the author. You know, we have now this like possibly a committee of designers, programmers, engineers, data visualization experts collaborating together on a book. So I'm wondering, you know, who interprets the book? Who decides how the book is sort of meted out and parceled out in your view? And then, you know, if you want to more broadly speak on what does this mean for sort of the document of a text as a historical record, as a kind of time, as like a memento of a particular period of time when it's so adaptive and changing?
Well, one of the ideas that we were exploring, to address the second part of your question first, is the idea that if you were to get a hold of one of these adaptive books, you would actually be able to use that book more thoroughly as a memento than current books, because it would be able to remember all the things that you might have done to it when you were 2 or 3. And then if you kept that book until you were in your mid-40s, and you could go back and look at all of the notes you wrote in it in high school, or looked at all of the different things that your classmates said during the university discussions of related texts, you would have almost a time capsule of your own life right there. Whereas right now, the current book, yeah, we do keep them as cherished objects, but to a large degree, different books serve as time capsules for different periods of our lives.
Right. But there's a tension, I think, between the sort of personal time capsule and then the fact that, you know, a history written in the 1950s is going to look different than a history written in the 2000s, you know. And so what is it, does historical meaning change as we continue to adapt these books? Less than personal meaning, I follow the argument and think it's really interesting, but I'm more curious about, you know, the actual, like, this is what the text says versus this is what my version of the text says. I wonder if you could speak to that as a sort of problematic or something that you're addressing.
Well, it is a problem, I think. And it's not a problem that I think that we've currently come to any type of agreement on even now. If you look at what the internet has been doing to what is held as true. Our news media is completely influenced by what people are tweeting and what people see on YouTube. Whoever comments first is taken as the first source, the true source. And I think history books have always had sort of a flavor of being the product of whoever wrote them, whatever team wrote them, whatever period they were written in. And I don't think that creating a book that is an adaptive book is going to necessarily introduce a new state of change there. If anything, it will just continue in the model that has always existed.
Yeah, I was actually going to add, I don't think it adds a new problem. I think it just makes the problem more visible. Maybe it affects more people. I don't know if there's a solution for it yet, but, you know, they say that, I mean, even the history that we might have in a text that was written ages ago, history was written by the side that won, you know, things like that. And all this means is that there might be less certainty in what's written now was what was written yesterday or the day before. So we talked, you know, in our teams about, just for example, if an author makes a mistake, you know, you used to have to put out something later to correct that mistake. Now you just go back and edit the original content. So on one hand, that kind of challenges our notion of being responsible for what you write and or the concept of objective truth. But on the other hand, there are pluses to that. I mean, it's more efficient. We don't have to print more space to put in sorries and I forgots and this was a mistake, because you can hopefully trust that whatever version you're using of something is as up-to-date and hopefully correct, depending on if you're reading fiction or non-fiction. So I think it's definitely a two-sided problem for good and bad.
I'd like to raise a question of all of our speakers today, and anyone really would like to respond. In discussing the book leading up to this conference, we've discussed the value of books. So even in discussions with Ahmed, our visuals person, we spoke of markets where you can get a book for just very, very cheap, for a few cents. And then also you can think of Da Vinci's original books, which have gone for $83 million, the first edition of the Audubon graphic books, which have gone for $11 million. What do your technologies do for the future of the value of books? If every copy is uniform, every Kindle, for example, to note what's existing right now, is a first edition, so to speak, What's the difference in a first edition or a later edition? Where goes that value if we digitize it? If anyone has thoughts.
Well, right now we're seeing, I mean, technology changes very, very quickly. And so with the addition of a new technology could be the addition of new features to that book. So in the same way you have the enhanced DVD version of a movie, you could have this book, which, you know, being from the design team that I'm on, this book, which we originally presented with just smell, now involves taste. So it's getting coffee.
I'm not sure what you lose by having certain books lose their value in that. I think the whole point of the printing press was it made books accessible, and I don't see the problem with having these super valuable books being available to everyone. Like, I understand that people want it because it's worth something, and I don't think that means that books that already have that value will lose their value, but I'm not sure what we lose by greater access.
I think it's the inverse problem that's more difficult. You know, I can go to a thrift store and buy hundreds and hundreds of books for a couple dollars. There's other kinds of digital technology I could potentially buy. Odds are when I get that digital technology home, it will be half working, if at all. A book is a book is a book as long as the pages are somewhat held together. So I'm wondering what this means for sort of widespread. I mean, you know, in America today, I think 98% of adults are literate, and I'm wondering if the price of reading a book is buying some fairly expensive electronic device. I mean, this $200 with a 2-year subscription that winds up costing more than $1,000, or an iPad's $500, a Kindle Fire is $200. You know, if the cost of buying a book is a threshold of that amount of money, what happens to sort of the democratization of reading and mass literacy? I think that's a real question, and I'm wondering if anyone has any response to
Well, I
that.
think that's what's happened with the book too, is when they first came out, you know, maybe I rushed to the beginning of how the book was created. It's not everyone could buy them when they were first created. They too were expensive. Only certain people were able to afford them. And then as technology improves and we streamline the process of how you make something, it becomes cheaper and more accessible. So maybe a Kindle or an iPad won't always be this expensive. And I don't think any of us are arguing that the traditional book has no place. And I think it's just an awkward transition from value to accessibility, because I don't think that the value of a book for me has ever been in its rarity. But I'm not sure that you guys would be asking this much.
And I think it just goes with any product when it just comes out in the market, it's really expensive because not everyone can access it, but as people start using it and like it, it becomes cheaper and accessible to everyone. It's with any product you use in a house or your workplace. So
another piece that's still missing from these new technologies is the ability to, you know, kind of serendipitously flip through and get random access to a book. On a Kindle, you have to enter a specific page, like flipping, you know, the time to load each page is a long time, whereas flipping through any of the art books that we have up with, you know, very dense, you know, high resolution images, it's just not possible. And there is a lot of, I don't know, experience, or you get a sense of a tone. You get to meet a book by flipping through it, or even just like walking through shelves and the serendipity of those experiences. So both random access, but then also scale. Some of the books we have up there on our media display counter, we brought in rather large books, because how do you translate, you know, a spread that's full bleed and put it onto an iPad that's this big, or, you know, a Kindle or a phone? And we actually have one very intense image, a photograph, and then we've scanned it in and have it on the iPad, and then also show the compression required to compress it to be like a more reasonably sized photo, and what you lose from the original experience. So I still feel like there is intrinsic value in the book. There is a certain magic to it that we still, with technology, have not touched on, at least those two things. I appreciate where this sentiment is going. It is pushing a lot of frontiers that I think are very absolutely valuable, but there's still a gap. There's still a lot of room for improvement and growth, which is exciting.
Estelle, did you want to respond to that?
I'd like to respond.
Okay.
Yeah.